Washington, D.C.? Well, we have some people straggling in, but as you can see that our guest today is Gerald W. McEntee. And before I do the introduction, let me check with Renee to see what we've... Sounds like we got some people on the line. Why don't...
Is that Obama? Obama, you on the line?
Yeah, let us on. And we'll
I thought he was coming to the class himself, but apparently not.
No. He couldn't make it.
So, those who are on the phone, let us know who's there. Hello,
Joe Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence. How are you?
Good.
Joe Lawrence, wow. Hi, Joe.
Jay.
Who else do we have? Anybody else calling in? Well, we have an intimate crowd today. So let's do some introductions here so Jerry knows who everybody is.
I'm going to mute the line before you do that.
Nope.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay. Pablo?
I'm Pablo, I work in communications.
What?
Pablo, my name is Pablo, I work in communications. I
Oh, yes,
started
Pablo.
about a year ago.
Good, Pablo.
Okay.
I'm Kevin Conti from General Service.
Great.
Well, who are you?
Kevin Conti.
Gregory?
And Gregory King from Communications as well.
And we have Barbara McEntee as well.
Yes.
And others who will, when they straggle in, will just have to catch up with the speed at which we're going. We're going to do two kinds of things today. We're going to probe Jerry's recollections about a short list of, well, could get long, but a list of people who helped organize the union in different parts of the country, who most or all, well, probably none of you had the opportunity to meet. In fact, half of them are people I didn't even have the opportunity to meet. And if you consider that how ancient I am, that's pretty. We're talking
And
ancient.
half of them are dead.
And that's right. There's a number of them you won't have the opportunity to meet anymore. And then the second part is we're going to take 1 year or a year and a half of AFSCME history that has a lot of lessons in it for today and cover that in some more detail. So without further ado,
Whoa.
Mr. King.
I was just curious, is this being recorded?
Yeah, every one of them are recorded. You know, they all go up on we have a website.
Okay, all right.
So everything is.
So we can make it available.
It
at
is
some
available
future
to everybody in the
date
class,
to
so
historians.
everybody who's involved. Oh, yeah.
Historians.
The many historians who will. Well, there's some of the stories that we're not going to want to make up.
Oh, that's
I was just being protective.
You gotta cut
Wanted
some
to
of
make
it out.
sure.
Yeah, we will. The people in the class get the full benefit of all of the details and the dirty parts, and we'll cut those out. Okay. All right. As you can tell, we actually had some fascinating stories at the class that met last week. So hopefully you'll share that same information with this group too, Jerry.
Mhm.
So Gerald W. McEntee, as you know, is the former president of this union, but he's also here in capacity of a teacher, and there couldn't be anybody better. I consider him my teacher. Taught me the business, taught me how these state governments work and what the labor relations could be made to be like, and how the union runs, and all of these things I think I deserve an advanced degree in from the teachings I got from Professor McEntee. So you'll get the benefit of a piece of that for the remainder of this class. And I'm just here to set things up by asking questions, naming names, and filling in a few details and prompts when I can.
Mhm.
But we're going to talk about some of the people who are high officers of the union or leaders in different parts of the country. And let's start with, we start with Joe Ames.
How many of you knew Joe Ames?
I don't think there's anybody here who...
Nobody here. Joe Ames is one of the pioneers was one of the pioneers of the union. Joe is now passed on. He was the head of the judicial panel. He was the secretary treasurer of the union as well. Came from Missouri. Was around a long time. I told at least I can tell at least one story about Joe. He was a very dedicated trade unionist, and he lived in Washington D.C. after moving from Missouri. And every time you came to Washington D.C., you had to look up Joe and spend some time with Joe. The only problem with that, in terms of Joe, was that Joe had a beard that was larger probably than Santa Claus's beard, and much uglier than Santa Claus's beard. And when you came to Washington from the field, you would inevitably have to have breakfast with Joe. And Joe, for breakfast every time, would have those, what are those called, Paul? Eggs Benedict. He would have Eggs Benedict.
And what restaurant was this at, or is?
I guess it was the Madison.
Madison,
Yeah, it was the
because
Madison.
that building had the AFSCME headquarters.
Yes, it did. That had the AFSCME headquarters. And so I had the pleasure of sitting down with Joe in the morning, and he would have his Eggs Benedict. And it was the ugliest thing that you would ever want to see, because he had this beard, and I don't know how much of the Eggs Benedict he actually got to eat, because it looked to me like it was 3/4 of it was on his beard, right? And ugly, very, very ugly. But he enjoyed it. He enjoyed it very much. He and Jerry Worth had an eventual shootout. One with another, which is what you would have in a shootout. Worth had no time for him after a while, and literally chucked him off the judicial panel. I remember that even Joe came down with a decision when he was with the judicial panel that had to do with Rhode Island, and Jerry didn't like the decision at all and wanted it overruled, and wanted Ames to do it and the other people on the judicial panel, and they wouldn't do it. And so he got very, very angry, Worth. I think Keller used to say there was two ways that Worth would do things, Worth's way and Worth's way. And that's the way he would operate. And so he got rid of Ames off the judicial panel. Ames sued him for that. And matter of fact, Ames won the case, right, Paul?
Mm-hmm,
Ames won the case, and he ended up getting, and back in those days, this was a lot of lucre. He got about $25,000 from the union for what Worth did. And he built a swimming pool in his yard, and they called it the Jerry Worth Swimming Pool. That's a true story.
So Ames started out in St. Louis. He was a World War II veteran.
Yes, he was. As a matter of fact, he was. Joe, myself, and a guy from the mine workers who did a lot of their PR. were at a meeting in Pennsylvania. We were in a hotel room and trying to put together some literature having to do with an organizing drive. And everyone, matter of fact, he was a hero in World War II. And every once in a while, in the room, which was quiet, we were trying to work on these things, and you'd hear, yeah, all right, we'll keep going on. We'll go on again. Okay, well, we'll keep going. And then a guy said, the guy from the mine workers said, what the fuck is that noise? And he had a leg, what do you call it, leg?
A wooden leg,
Wooden leg, yeah. And Joe said, that's my fucking leg, bud. He put it up on the table like that. I was so embarrassed. So embarrassed that guy was. But he made his point.
So he was part of the WRF movement in the early 60s that took over control of the Union at the 64 convention. That was the committee, whatever they call that committee. And CORE, the CORE committee. And then the convention mandated, or a special convention was called to do a revise of the AFSCME Constitution.
That's correct.
And he was the chair of that, right?
That's correct. A matter of fact, my father was on that committee. And they did it, they went around the country and held some hearings. And then they met in Denver. The union met in Denver. They liked that Denver routine. And they met in Denver and put the whole remodeled Constitution in front of basically delegates of the Union, from the Union, for a new Constitution that went through, I think without a dissenting votes, it went through.
And it's basically the Constitution that we have today.
Yes, it
There
is.
have been
Yes, it is. Yeah.
relatively few changes. Weinberg gave a whole presentation on that about 3 months ago to this group.
Oh, did he?
Yep.
Good. Good. He would know.
He
He
was the
would-
keeper of the document. no
Yeah, he
question
would
about
know.
that.
Yeah, he was keeper of the documents.
And
And
so the judicial panel was created in that Constitution, but Joe was first, he succeeded Gordon Chapman as Secretary-Treasurer, right?
yes, he did.
And served as Secretary-Treasurer until Worf decided that he wanted to put Bill in as Secretary-Treasurer, right?
Yeah. Worf decided that we had to have some diversity in terms of the union and particularly the officers. So he picked Bill to be the Secretary-Treasurer and literally replace Joe Ames. I remember I came into Washington for, I don't know, I guess some kind of meeting, and we were headquartered at the Madison, and came into the meeting, and Worf called me into his office and told me that he was going to do this, and the reason he was going to do it was he felt we were getting more African Americans in the Union, and that we needed more diversity inside the Union, which seemed like a pretty good reason. And so we went through with that, and that's how Lucy literally came on to the scene and replacing Ames.
And was and then Joe became the head of the judicial panel, and was Joe the first full-time head of the judicial panel? I mean, is that they created a salary for it at that point?
No, I think the first head of the judicial panel
Somebody?
was that guy from Milwaukee, from Wisconsin. Remember that guy?
Well, no, let's see. I'm going to get the name wrong. I know there was a Joe Robeson at one point. Who was
No.
Who was on the
The
panel.
guy before him.
Okay.
There was a guy before him.
Mueller?
Nah.
No. Okay, we'll have
We'll
to
get
look
it.
it
We'll
up.
get it.
We'll look it up.
We'll get it, and before you leave, you'll get it.
So then Ames served as head of the judicial panel, and the shootout in Rhode Island the disagreement over Rhode Island. You told a story last week about Wanda Weaver, who was a leader, rank and file leader in Pennsylvania, was a member of the panel.
Mhm.
So when this got appealed to the full panel, she had to vote on whether to sustain.
It was even before that.
Oh,
Worth called her and said that this was coming up and would come up, and I need your vote to overturn the judicial panel. And she said, well, where's the panel on this? And Worth had to say, well, they're on the other side. And so she said, no, I'm staying with them. And boy, from that day on, she was in the shit house
yeah.
with Brother Worth.
Until you got elected.
Yeah, and that's true. And so Joe played a major part in this union, Joe Amos. Paul asked me to mention our church. Our church was a fellow from Minnesota. All those unions of ours that are up in Minnesota now were, if not founded by church, they knew church, and church worked on them and with them for any number of years. He was very famous in one regard when we had an election, and it was in those days the union was formed in a way that the executive board was at large. You voted for an executive board, not by region, as we have it today. And so we were having this convention and we were having this election. And they had it pretty well figured out. It was Xander, it was Worth, and it was executive board against executive boards. And they had it figured out, Xander's people, that someone would be recognized from the floor, and that immediately that person would nominate all the executive board of Xander, and they would be first on the ballot and give them somewhat of an advantage. Except they forgot our church, right? So it was Xander's people and then all of Worth's people. And so they, the saying then at that convention, I thought was rather clever, was they had 10 people on the executive board, and the theme was take 10 and go to church. And we didn't win anyway, so
Yeah,
it was a good theme.
That was the year Worth one, right?
Yeah, that's true. That was the year Worth one, so I guess it wasn't a very good theme.
But all those locals in northern Minnesota that come from, that are in 65, the
Mhm.
people in Duluth that are in Council 5, that was all, a lot of those people were connected to the Iron Range.
The range.
The miners, and that's where church came out of, and built the union up there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another name that nobody will have heard of. Norm Scott?
Norm Scott. Hell of a name to have. Norm Scott was from Washington State, an incredibly brilliant guy, Norm Scott. The only qualm I had with Norm Scott was that he didn't believe in collective bargaining at all, and was totally civil service. He thought civil service was the way to go. That's how you got things done. He did get some things done through the legislature up in that part of the country, but inevitably collective bargaining took over, and even took over in that part of the country as well. But a very, very smart, brilliant guy.
So, but it took a long time, so the
Yeah.
Washington Federation state employees, our Council 28 now, goes back to when it was really a state employee association and had that philosophy. And even after Norm, George Maston, who came after him, was very skeptical about the bringing in collective bargaining as a way of life, and it took they're one of the more recent parts of the union to really go to collective bargaining.
Yeah. Matter of fact, it was so, I can't say bad, but it was so difficult to make these things happen that sometimes, and I remember 2 occasions, and one was Washington State, where you had to literally pay them off. I had to go out and once Scott was gone and I was the president, there were still the Washington State Federation employees. And I went out and had a meeting.
The word AFSCME didn't appear in their
Yeah,
literature.
AFSCME wasn't there at all. So I went out and had a meeting with them, and he had to use some, filthy lucre to get them to add AFSCME to their title. So they became Washington State Federation employees, AFSCME, AFL-CIO. It's a shame when you have to do those kind of things, but you do have to do them. You know that.
You said there was more than one. Was there another place where you had to convince them to?
Hawaii was one, but that was a much easier convince, much easier ask and give them to them. A fella that Paul has on the list is a guy by the name of P.J. Champa. Does anybody remember, knew P.J. Champa? No?
I know who he is, but I never met him. But I read your book. And
He's in there.
He's in there.
He was a great organizer, a great and tough individual. Came out of the UAW, and he also came out of Baltimore. A good guy, terrific guy, Champ. A good fighter for the workers, for the people. And it was really a mentor of mine. And so he and I did a lot of organizing together. And I remember I told this last week, a story about Champ. We were trying to get collective bargaining in Pennsylvania. It was hard, it was difficult. And Champ had I guess it was a cousin or an uncle or somebody who was in the highway department. And I don't know whether he was superintendent or foreman or whatever the hell he was, but he had some real influence. And so Champ and I went out to see him in the wilds of Pennsylvania in the winter, and had a great meeting with him. And he was going to talk us up and talk up collective bargaining. It was very good, very good. And it was a dinner, and we had a few drinks. As a matter of fact, probably more than a few drinks. And but we left, and Champ was really on his way to, let's see, we had to go through Altoona, but that's where he had to get a train to go back into Baltimore, I guess it was. And it was snowing, it was terrible. And the car was sliding all around, and I was driving. And finally, these lights went on behind us, and it was the state police, and they had pulled us over. And so I got out to talk to them, which I did, and told them, who we were and what we were trying to do, and how it would be so helpful to them if we got collective bargaining, in the state of Pennsylvania, and where they would benefit from it, and cut us a break here. And the guy said we wouldn't. The super Said, we wouldn't mind doing that if you could get your friend over there to stop pissing on our car. And, which we had to do, and get Champ in the car and take him to the train. Matter of fact, they gave us an escort. They gave us an escort to the train station in Altoona, so we could get Champ out of the country. Not out of the country, out of town.
Champ was the field services director, right?
Yeah, he was a lot of things, really, but yeah, that was one of them that he was. And
Did he build, in particular, the union in Baltimore, or was that already there when he?
no, I think that was already there.
When he came to us.
Yeah, I think it was already there. And I saw he died just about 2 weeks ago.
Ernie
Ernie
Crowfoot,
Crowfoot. Yeah, he died. Yeah.
So there were a couple of guys came out of that. I think it was
UAW thing.
Martin Aircraft.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Martin Aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell a little story about how Ciampa came to the union.
Go ahead.
He was active in this whole group was active in in the UAW, and they got him, and he was taken on as assistant regional director of the region, whatever the region number was for this area, and in the UAW, in addition to the convention, there's also the caucus, the Ruther caucus, which really is where they decide who's going to be regional directors. And so it came to the next convention, and he had organized pretty well, and so they had nominations at the caucus for regional director, and the incumbent, the guy he was working for, got nominated. Then somebody else got up and nominated Ciampa himself to be regional director. And everybody in the UAW, you always wear these shirts with the name of, regional director so-and-so, with the slogan of the year. So they all took off the shirt of the first guy and they put on the Ciampa shirt. So Ciampa was apparently the first guy elected in the UAW who was not on the official slate.
Yeah.
So they froze him out. Completely. They just there was no correspondence between Detroit and his office for 3 years, and at the end of the 3 years, the members in Maryland figured that they'd better get somebody who could communicate with the headquarters, and he was unemployed and quickly hired by I suppose by Worf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he came
Sure.
to us.
Oh, that's a good story.
Yep.
Good story, Champ.
Well, let's get some rascals now.
This is Bill Van Zandt. Paul asked me to mention him. When I was at the National Union Workers president, there was an election out in Michigan, and it was a tight election, very, very tight, and they even froze the ballots right in the box and all that kind of stuff. So Worf asked me to go out and check it out, which I did. I went out there and I met with Van Zandt, who incidentally ended up with how many kids? 17 or
A lot.
17 kids he had. And who could cheat? I mean, if they had 17 kids, for Christ's sake. So I went out there and I said to Van Zandt, I said, where these ballots been? He said, well, in this box. And I said, well, who's been in charge of the box? He said, well, I have. I said, and you haven't done anything to these ballots in the box? No, are you kidding? I would never do something like that. I don't know how we found out, but he did. And he cheated in that election. He eventually left the union. I forget how he left the union.
As a result of the Fitzpatrick, Van Zandt, Florida stuff.
Oh, okay, I got it.
And he went state's evidence.
Yeah, he did. Oh, wow. He was a kind guy.
Oh.
He did.
He had been the field services director, right?
Mm-hmm. They were all field services directors at one point.
Me too.
Right.
Okay.
And Van Zant now is in Puerto Rico, right? He ran away with his secretary, who was the sister of the head of the district council in Michigan, right?
Mhm.
Lloyd.
Lloyd. Yeah, it'll come.
Let's just call him Lloyd.
Yeah.
All right.
He was
Lloyd.
the Detroit Council, right?
Yeah, he was the Detroit Council, not the State Council. That's right. Lloyd. Well, whatever, Lloyd. And so he ran away to Puerto Rico with that young woman and left his family and everybody else back in Michigan.
He had been done a lot of the organizing of all the work, the county and city employees around the state in Michigan. Probably at one point we were in every corner of the state. We still are in most corners of the state. Walt Oliver, Bob Johnson,
It was a mess.
and they had 6 different councils,
Yeah.
something
Mhm.
like that. But he was a guy that Worf relied on to lay down the law and carry out Worf's program, and he was relentless about that. No
Mhm.
question about that in terms of Bill Van Zant.
Another one, but I think some of you may know him, or you certainly know of him, which is Victor Gottbaum. Right now, Victor Gottbaum came out of Chicago. He was with the meat cutters at one point.
He was before I was. Yep.
Yeah, the meat cutters. And he and Lillian came out of Chicago and went into New York and take over 37 of basically because Worf left.
Right. They came while Worf was still there. Vic was director of the council in Chicago,
Mhm.
Council 19. Lillian came out of the Cook County Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
They had an unsuccessful strike for recognition at Cook County. The mayor at that time, a man named Daley, made it clear to everybody in town that he didn't want to ever see Victor Gottbaum organizing anybody in his city. And Worf said, well, I think I could use you in New York. So he was in New York under Worf during the organizing drive, right?
Mm-hmm. I remember I was a little farther down on the totem pole at that point, and we had a strike of welfare workers
In New York.
in New York City, and matter of fact, it was a good strike. We were able to close it up pretty tight, and a lot of our AFSCME members from New York City would come out and walk the picket lines at lunchtime and everything else. So it was pretty. It was a healthy kind of strike, and it was healthy. The point Victor used to go around the city, and to make sure that nobody went to work, he would fill the locks with hot lead so that the doors could not open to let anybody come in and go to work. So it was a very hot, successful strike that we had in New York. Jerry came in and actually settled the goddamn thing. I worked that strike. It was funny. But Victor, an excellent trade unionist, and then ran 37. Good union, a very good union. He wanted to be president very, very much, very desperately, and he and I kind of went at it a couple different times in regards to who would be the president. And he could never, and I'm not sure, or maybe I am, he could never get the support of CSEA.
Mm-hmm.
Never get the support to become president from CSEA. Joe McDermott couldn't stand him for some reason. And I think the reason is, and Victor couldn't understand that it didn't work the way he thought it would work. I think that Cuomo, when he was governor, called McDermott and asked him to support Gotbaum. And that was about the worst thing that anybody could ever do with McDermott, because he hated Cuomo more than he hated the plague. And that was just a bad, bad move. I don't know whether you remember this one. Cuomo was ready to, run for president or something.
That's right.
Yeah, and he was ready to file his papers up in New Hampshire, and they had a plane waiting for Cuomo out on the runway to go up and file these. And CSEA came out in opposition to him.
Endorsed Clinton.
Yeah,
That's what
and
they
he
did.
felt, that if he couldn't get his own people behind him, that he really wasn't satisfactory to run for president. So he didn't run.
And that's the story of how Cuomo did not enter the New Hampshire primary.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. They supported Uncle Bill.
Uncle Bill, and Uncle Bill hadn't forgotten about AFSCME being the first union to support it.
Nope, he never has. Never has. So go ahead.
Yeah, with Gotbaum, he wanted to be the next president. He thought he was in line because Worf had been, his mentor. You thought you should be the next president after Worf, and you developed some support around the country for that proposition. Worf, toward the end of that decade, was getting he always had physical challenges. He had emphysema. He had he had that club foot, so that there was a lot of pain connected with him every day, right? I mean, this is
Yeah.
and but it got worse in 79, 80.
Mm-hmm.
But Gotbaum decided to run against him, and Gotbaum put together a campaign aimed at the 1980 convention, which we had in Anaheim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look what I found. I found the Gotbaum literature with Super Council, with all this. This was so he was running a campaign that Worf fought back against with all the power of the institution that he could muster.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time he got to the 1980 convention, Gotbaum decided that he just didn't have votes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Worf passed away within the next 12 months, like 6 or 7 months later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had the funeral, and then they immediately had the executive board meeting to fill the vacancy, and the three candidates, people should realize this, was not just Lucy and McAtee, but it was also Gotbaum. So how did that turn out?
How do you think?
I think the result was you won.
Yeah.
But you could fill in some of the details here, and Vic's role in that.
Victor, as we're going down toward the end and trying to make sense out of that, realized that he didn't have the horses, and I realized he didn't have the horses. And so I went to see him in his room. And in the meantime, 37 had voted unanimously in a caucus to support Bill. And, that put me in a lot of trouble. So I went in and he was in his room, and I met with Victor. And I said, I need your votes. to become, the president. He said, well, I'd like to do that, but I says, I can't do that. I mean, my whole council went for Lucy. I said, Victor, it's a secret ballot. I mean, you have to remember, it's a secret ballot. Nobody has to know how you're voting, right? Nobody has to know. Oh, you go ahead and have a good night's sleep. He said, you'll be all right. So I did. I went to bed. Well, I didn't go to bed. I mean, I did some other things. But he went in the election room, and there were all kinds of boxes in there to vote, and there were 100 ballots and 50 ballots and all that kind of stuff.
You had the weighted vote, or he and the Diop each had half of the DC 37 votes, which was probably 120,000 at that time. So they had 60 each, and you'd get this many pieces of paper that were worth 10,000 votes, and this many that were worth 1,000, 500, or whatever. So you didn't actually vote all your votes on one piece of paper. You had to put them in the.
Mhm.
This is before computers. Do you all know that we didn't used to have computers? Just want to make that clear. So you had an observer who came back to you and said,
And matter of fact, my observer was Vinnie O'Brien. Was in there, and he came back, and there was also the 3 A's were in there as well.
American Arbitration.
American Arbitration.
Was running the election. Yeah.
And so Vinnie came into the room where the executive board was meeting, and he said, you won, and you won by about 35,000. And I had figured it would be like that, or right around that. And then the arbitration lady came in and said, will everybody take their seats? And everybody did. And then she announced the numbers. And it was accurate. I had won by right about 35,000, something like that. And so that's how I became the president of the union. And so as not to screw around, I had Lucy swear me in right away, right at that meeting, and then I asked them to approve 2 things for me, and I asked them I wanted to nominate Ernie Revelinsky as the chief of staff, and I took a vote, and then I wanted to have Kirshner as the general counsel. That took a vote, and so they did both of those. And then we stopped and we recessed, and it was around Christmas. So we had that time, that we get between the holidays. Yeah, during that week. And so I had a number of meetings with O'Malley and Ernie and people like that to get my head around the union during that period of time. And that's how we took off.
So
You like that, Mark?
I did.
When Gottbaum ran against Worf, so if you count Gottbaum running against Worf, even though it didn't come to a vote, but for a time it looked very threatening. It was an all-out, it could have gone either way if Worf hadn't succeeded in turning it around. If you count Worf running against Zander twice, he ran in 62 and almost won. He ran in 64 and he won by, this much, right? And then Jerry's election that you just described, and then the one we just went through. We've had the fewest changes of leadership of any union. We're now pushing toward 77 years of the union, with only 4 presidents in the whole period of time. No other unions had that kind of stability. and the most democracy going on at the same time. Every one of those has been wide open
Mhm.
with could go either way kind of outcomes, right?
That's right, yeah, that's right.
And so there are these long stretches of, no big factionalism, hardly any. And then when the time comes for a change in leadership, it's wide open. So I think it's kind of it's a key to contrasting our union to other unions, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I remember Worf called me down to Washington from Pennsylvania, and we were still trying to get collective bargaining in Pennsylvania. And I just took a terrible shellacking from CSEA in
New York.
in New York State, and lost. And he wanted to get back in the ball game fast and big. He didn't want to, like Bill Clinton, be irrelevant. And so he said, can you get that collective bargaining thing through? I said, yeah, I think we can. He said, and in the meantime, on the way down to meet him, I got these maps of Pennsylvania. And I marked off highway yards and, all these kind of stuff where the people would be. And I laid them on his desk. He says, you think you can do this? And I said, yeah, I think I can do it. He said, how much is it going to cost? I said, about $2 million, which in those days was a lot of money, but today it's shit. And so he said, okay, we'll do it. We'll try and do it. And so off we went to the races to get that done. And I remember while we were doing that, we got, and the union hadn't won an election, a collective bargaining election, in I don't know how long, right? Never even talked about. And we won the city of Lancaster. And he called me up. I was at home on a Saturday after we won. He called me up, and it was like we had won a planet, right? He was so happy. And I got him for a big raise over the phone. I did, yeah. And I was making like $10,000 a year then. So we got Lancaster, and then we moved on to get collective bargaining in the state, and then moved on to win so many of those elections in the state. And he and I became very, very tight, Worf and I. And when he was sick, I mean, getting sick and sicker and sicker, he used to call me all the time, and we used to talk on the phone. And he had, what did he have, herpes and all kinds of other shit. And, he had to pee all the time, and wow, it was murder for him. And he would always call me, and we'd talk, and then he would go up to the Cape, and he'd call me, and we'd talk. And the only thing that would help him was hypnotism. And so he got these tapes, and he hypnotized himself up on the Cape. He says, "You think there's something wrong if somebody's like hypnotized himself?" I said, "What the fuck, man? Whatever works. I mean, Jesus Christ." And so he would do that. And when I won and became the president, I came back from Washington to Harrisburg, and I had a thing in my apartment that recorded messages, because I was never there, and I never got messages anyway, right? But I come back, and I was back about, I don't know, about 7, 8 hours. And I turned it on just for the sake of turning it on. And it was worth. And he was in the hospital, but he wanted me to call him. And I couldn't get to him. And so, he eventually passed away. But I'm convinced to this day, with all due respect, that he wanted to tell me he wanted to support me, president of the union. Yeah.
Died that night.
Died that night, yeah. It was Harvey, the guy who drove the car and all that stuff. Did he call us? No, Ernie called us. Yeah, Ernie called us. To tell us that he had died, he had passed on.
You mentioned the New York campaign against CSEA. Wasserman in March gave us a whole rundown on how the New York law, the Taylor law, got passed, CSEA's special relationship that they had with Rockefeller and some of these other governors up there in New York, and how, in effect, they had an inside track on constructing how that election was going to take place to put us at the worst disadvantage that they possibly could. Even described Lillian Roberts going from mental hospital to mental hospital, calling these wildcat strikes to try to get a separate bargaining unit for the mental health people. And because they were originally going to just have one bargaining unit for everybody, all 290,000 people, and we wouldn't have had a prayer because they were all members of CSEA. That's how they got their health care, was by joining the union, the association, not the union. So we lost 4 of those 5 elections. So what you clarified last week, which Wasserman was not really able to answer when we asked him about it, was how did those bargaining units in Pennsylvania get constructed, and the schedule of when the elections were going to take place, so that AFSCME had a decent chance of coming out on top, if not the inside track. You want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we fought for collective bargaining. We saw collective bargaining coming. Ernie Klein was the lieutenant governor, and Schaap put him in charge of labor relations as well. He was a good friend of ours out of Beaver County. And so we had that. And then the fellow that was put in charge, the administrator, the white collar guy, that would put together the collective bargaining units, was a guy by the name of Chris Cervantes, whom I knew very, very well. And he and I sat down at a number of dinners, as well as meetings, but really a number of dinners. We were good friends. He believed that he knew more about this than anybody else, than any other union. And so we worked on putting these bargaining units together, which we were able to do. So we were making sense out of it. So there was a trades and labor bargaining unit. There was an institutional bargaining unit of people who worked in hospitals and stuff like that. There was a white collar bargaining unit, clerical bargaining unit. And the only thing that went wrong, I mean, we did everything, we got everything. That's how we ended up, with these 75,000 members in a footprint. And the only thing that happened was that Wendell Young, who was head of the retail clerks, he wanted desperately to have the liquor store clerks in his union, and a bargaining unit that would be liquor store clerks. And I already knew from my meetings with Cervantes that the liquor store clerks were going in a bargaining unit of all clerks, right? So I had that in my back pocket. So we met. Matter of fact, Keller was at the meeting in a bar in Philadelphia. And so we were talking about it. I said, all right, look, we'll make a deal. And I said, you can have get the liquor store clerks and have it, right? If there's a bargaining unit for liquor store clerks. But if they're in a bargaining unit of clerks, then they're AFSCME. And I already knew that's where they were going, right? And he said, all right, I'll make that deal. And he then went to see Shap, and Shap called
the governor.
Chris Servanis. Shap was the governor, and he called Chris Servanis and had them put in a bargaining unit of their own. And that's how he got the liquor store clerk, and we didn't, but we got everything else.
So the lesson here, which was then applied, the number of lessons were then applied from the Pennsylvania success to other places, but one of the lessons was getting hands-on in the constructing and bargaining units by dealing with the professionals, but also dealing with the governors.
Do
So,
both.
in Ohio, you had direct dealings with the governor.
I did. He had no idea what collective bargaining was. Celeste was the governor.
Richard Celeste.
Yeah, I went in, I met with him when he was governor, in his mansion, whatever they call it, and I explained the whole thing of collective bargaining to him and how it would work and all that kind of stuff, bargaining units, and so he bought it. And so that's how we got it in Ohio. And see, where else did we do that? We did that in Indiana, which worked out a different way. But we did that with Bai in Indiana, sitting in his little room that he had in his mansion. So we were able to do that in a number of places. And as you say, to work with both the professionals and the politicians. And if you can get that done and work with it, that's what to do.
We had done it in Illinois. Worf had those conversations with the then governor of Illinois, Walker. Not the current Walker, the other Walker.
Dan.
Dan
Is it
Walker.
Dan?
Yeah, you got it. You did it with the governor of Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
You did it with the governor of Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And then the governor after that governor.
Mm-hmm.
You did it with the governor of Maryland, Paris Glendenning.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that Worf did it with several of the governors that came around in the 70s. Iowa. I mean, there was also this dimension where they would have blue ribbon commissions with some law school professor who was experienced in labor relations who would do the packaging and provide the rationale and the cover and testify in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
That Wasserman explained, but all of that was, and those people also ran in an orbit that
We were in.
We were in that orbit too.
Mm-hmm.
And to finish the Indiana story, what was it that gave the UAW the ability to compete with us? Was they had a stronger tie to the governor than we did, right?
Exactly. And people too.
They had a shitload of people in the state.
Shitload of people.
But the tie to the governor was proven when they had to count the ballots.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should tell this story. The big unit, the clerical unit,
Mm-hmm.
there was a 38 vote discrepancy in the ballot count. It was that there were 57 challenge ballots that were in a bag that were being held on to. Was it 38? Anyway, those were our votes, and the UAW would have lost it if those votes had been counted. And they went to the governor and they convinced the governor to never let those votes be counted. And we know that the labor relations guy actually opened the envelope when it was all done and counted them. And we know that we should have won that. And we actually had more votes than they did. It's a dirty business.
Except when you win.
Except when you win. Well, there's that. And of course, now with the last governor, we're all blown out of the water in Indiana. So, but the other lesson that I mentioned last time, I want to mention again, Jerry should know this, is that we were instructed by the field services directors. I started in Illinois, and we were running the same kind of statewide campaign that a number of other states had already run. And we were instructed to take the Bible of how Pennsylvania had worked, not just in terms of constructing the bargaining units, but the sequence of which units you've got to set it up so that the first unit that goes to vote is the one that helps you by giving you momentum. The story in Pennsylvania is that when you won the labor and trades, that was the momentum builder, right?
Sure.
Not that it settled everything. There were still fights, but it sounded like everybody melted away and said, "Okay, you can have the rest of it." But you had the momentum. Same thing successfully happened in Illinois, where we won all of the bargaining units except one, and we picked the one to go first, where we knew we would win, where we got 97%. And so that was then the pattern that was tried in other places. They tried to get the momentum to go all the way. And sometimes, like in Iowa, they also did elections in different schedule. I think they tried to pretty successfully applied the same theory there. There must be some states where collective bargaining has come where the law wasn't written in the general counsel's office of AFSCME, but I'm not sure which ones those are.
When we were in Pennsylvania, we got a call. Some of you may know this story. I think Paul does. We got a call that the Teamsters wanted to meet, and this is we had signing cards and all that, and we were in good shape, really very good shape. They asked us to meet in a club, not a cafeteria, I mean a big time club and bar and all that kind of business up right outside of Reading. And so I went up to meet with them. And I remember poor Pat Salvatore drove me there. And he just kept looking over his shoulder, because it was the Teamsters that we were going to go and meet with. So I go inside and I sit down at the bar with this guy. And he was the vice president of the Teamsters for the Eastern Coast. Is that what they called them? Eastern Coast?
Conference. Eastern Conference?
Eastern Conference.
Eastern States Conference.
Yeah, he was in charge of the Eastern Conference. And very powerful. And we sat down at the bar and he had a drink. I didn't have a drink. I wanted to keep my wits about me. And so he said, you're working for AFSCME. He said, you seem to know what the hell you're doing. I said, oh, well, thank you very much. That's nice to hear. And he said, here's a piece of paper. He says, piece of paper. He said, write down on that paper what AFSCME's paying you, and the pension, and everything else, the whole package. He said, write it down on a piece of paper. And I said, why? He said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll not only match it, but we'll go way beyond that. You write down on the other side of the paper what you want, okay, in terms of salary and all that kind of business. I said, oh, well, that's very kind, very nice of you. I said, well, I'm not going to do that. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, I've been AFSCME all my life. right? I was born in AFSCME. I said, I'm going to stay in AFSCME, and I'm going to be AFSCME till I die. This is what he said. That might be sooner than you think. Yeah. I said to myself right then, I gotta get the hell out of here. Ooh.
Oh, my goodness.
That's what I said, oh my goodness.
The other name we had there was Tom Fitzpatrick, under the rascal category.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Rascal.
You want me to talk about Tom Fitzpatrick?
Oh,
Yeah, he ended up in Florida, but he had been the field services director, and he came out of Pittsburgh, the electrical industry, electrical workers, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was another one of these people who Worf got the most use out of he possibly could, right?
Yes, he did. And Fitzpatrick was the kind of guy who walked through a plane terminal with Worf and, a couple other staffers. And Fitzpatrick would say, I told you Worf had to pee all the time. And Fitzpatrick would say, check it. Hey, you, check that bathroom. Check that bathroom. And somebody would have to go in and check out the bathroom as if somebody was going to be in there and, shoot Worf. But I guess the funniest story about Fitzpatrick was when we did run the Pennsylvania campaign, and he was in on it. I was in on it. The guy we couldn't remember last week from Illinois that broke his shoulder, and we had to have Les Keck come in and take care of him.
Well, Benedict?
No. You gave me these names last week.
I was good at it then.
Yeah, and he was in on it, and we had all these people, and we won really big time. And so we had a big party up in not the Poconos, but the other side, the mountains, and big party, and everybody was there, and everybody was drinking and drunk and all that kind of stuff. And Bruno Delano was there, and I told this story, I think.
Yes. You're going to tell it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, these people weren't there last week. But you have to know Bruno. I mean, really a crazy guy. I mean, good trade unionist, fighter, everything, but really a crazy guy, crazy guy. And so we had this one lady was from Woodville, and matter of fact, Fitzy kind of liked the lady a little bit, and I don't know whether she liked him or not, but he kind of liked her. And so we're having this big party in this suite of rooms, and everybody's drinking and everything. And Bruno comes in, and Fitzy's standing there, and I'm standing there, this lady's standing there, and Bruno comes over, and he's standing with us. And all of a sudden, he zips down his thighs, and he pulls out this dildo, about this big, right? And he starts pissing on Fitzpatrick's shoes, right? And Fitzy goes to me, Jerry, you see what he's doing? I said, yeah. He said, well, you think you ought to tell him to stop? I said, me? Oh, he's pissing on your shoes. I said, shouldn't you tell him to stop? And I thought he was going to kill Bruno. But Bruno didn't care, so
Okay. Fitzpatrick was the organizing director toward the very end of Worf's tenure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And went to Florida to run the union.
Mhm.
and continued to carry out missions for WRF. For example, when WRF was opposed by Gottbaum in 79 and 80, Fitzpatrick, Van Zandt, another fellow whose name I haven't mentioned, Walt Oliver, senior people in the Field Services Department put together the apparatus to support WRF, which included assigning staff to go to New York and help out dissidents inside a WRF's own council, right? And raising money. They raised a boatload of money for WRF's campaign because he needed some dough.
He was afraid that Gottbaum, coming from the city, New York City, and would get all these liberals and be able to get money and cash and everything from them in order to run his campaign. And so he had people go around the country trying to raise money for him. I remember they came into Pennsylvania and they met with me at a restaurant in Pennsylvania, outside of Harrisburg. And they said, you know, you're expected to give. I said, I'm expected to give what? I said, I'm a council director. I don't work for the National Union. He said, well, you're still expected to chip in. I said, I'm not chipping in shit, man. And so they left us. And they went, you know, on their way. And they did raise a lot of money. A lot of money. I got to tell this other story. I think I told last week. But Jerry was trying to just raise all kinds of hell on Victor and on his council. And it was a time when Victor was in a terrible battle with Jim Butler, right? Which was head of the hospital workers. Terrible battle. And so he picked a committee, Jerry, to go in and hold hearings. And Butler could testify, or anybody could testify, about the running of Council 37. So we all went into New York, and the only person who showed up to say anything was Jim Butler.
Committee of the
And,
board, committee.
It was a board committee,
Mhm.
yeah, and he called me and asked me to serve on it. And let me see how I can remember who on it.
Marquardt?
No. Myself, Stout,
Earl Stout?
Bonavita, Jerry, Abe's Wordling. I don't know anybody else who was on it. But we go in and we hold this investigatory hearing on Gottbaum 37. Butler, the only one who testifies. And then we meet, this was funny, we meet in the Woolworth building downstairs in their lunch, where you have lunch in that Woolworth building. Very nice. And so we go in and we sit down there, and we're going to discuss the Gottbaum issue. And over here is a great big mirror, right, like the end of that part of their building. And we're sitting there, and so we're having, you know, a sandwich and we're talking. And then Worf turns to me and he says, not too loud, not too loud. He said, you see those people over there? And I look over there. He said, they're listening to us. I said, Jerry, that is us. Oh my Lord above.
I I bet you that restaurant's still there in the Woodward Building.
Oh, I bet it is. That was a great restaurant.
Beautiful building.
Mhm.
Questions about any of these characters from the past? Because I'd like to switch over to this other area of inquiry. Okay, good. Let's go to 1994 election. Gingrich takes control of the House of Representatives. A bunch of our friends in the governor's mansions go down, and Clinton is thrown on the defensive, and this is after the failure of Clinton Hillary Care, whatever they called it, and the passage of NAFTA and the assault weapons ban. So it was a ugly outcome of the election, and we then had to deal with the consequences. Starting here in D.C. in Congress with Gingrich on the warpath. Now, unlike Scott Walker and these other guys that we've been dealing with since the other bad election, he didn't immediately go after our collective bargaining rights, but he went after our meal ticket, Medicare, Medicaid, etc. So the first story is how the Democrats were in a bunker, right? They were basically on the defense or in retreat, and we didn't think that was the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So we wanted to stop Gingrich. He's put a halt to, what the hell he was doing. And two of us had, a little bit of money. And so Dennis Rivera and their union and ours put together a program to run ads and kind of slam them around, put the blocks to them, and it really followed on a program that Dennis Rivera did earlier, when he was able to show with televised ads how you could take a piece out of somebody's ass, really. And he did that. I forget who he did it to. He did it to somebody, and he dropped them in the polls. They dropped them in the polls by about 9-10 points, something like that. So we went after Gingrich with these ads. If you remember, what was Gingrich's ads when the two people were sitting at the table?
Thelma and Louise, when they were going after Hillary.
Harry and Louise.
Harry and Louise. Thelma and Louise was the movie. Okay, Harry and Louise.
Yeah, and so we did something similar to that, to Gingrich, and it was quite successful, and we did quite well with that.
Our ads were called Grandma because we had Harry and Louise sitting at the same kitchen table, or people who looked just like them, and then one of their mothers, I don't know who Grandma was related to, whether it was Harry or Louise, listening to them talking about if Gingrich's thing passed on the Medicaid, what was going to happen to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she did an effective job of looking really, really upset,
Forlorn.
really frightened, and that's what gave them backbone, our
Mhm.
friends. Clinton, what was it that Clinton said about where he was?
He was relevant.
He said he had to do a press conference to say, "I'm still relevant." Well, that shows you how far he had sunk. But that was really the moment when, and Gingrich was not able to pass the Medicare and Medicaid reforms, and they're still trying to do it.
Mhm.
Paul Ryan's trying to do the same damn thing that
Mhm.
Gingrich was trying to do in 1995, and I think we're still successfully holding him
Still
off
alive.
for now.
Still alive.
So it was then, that was when you went to Kirkland for help?
Yeah, we were getting banged around all over the place, as was the whole labor movement, really. And so I went to Lane Kirkland, had a meeting with him, and, you know, did my crying act, and told him that he had to come up with dough. You know, that he had a lot of money. He had a big bankroll, and he had to come up with some money and help us out, help everybody out. He said, "Well, Jerry, I'm saving that for a rainy day." I'll never forget this. It's a lot of years ago. And I said, "Well, have you looked outside?" But it's pouring rain outside. Well, no, not raining hard enough. I can't do it. So he wouldn't come up with any money. And he had about, what, 75 million?
Yeah, it's in free reserves. They don't have that anymore. That's all gone. They cried broke, but they used to be sitting on a pile of dough.
So he wouldn't give us anything. So we made up our minds that we were going to come after his ass, and so he held at a board meeting. He held a press conference, big one, to announce that he was running again as president of the AFSCME. And they were pro forma. They did this all the time. And so when it was over, it was held in the hall at the AFL-CIO. So I walked up with these people. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute. I'm here to announce that this time around, President Kirkland is going to have opposition. Nobody's going to run against him." And they all went, Jerry, who is it? Time will come, we'll tell you who it is, but right now we're just letting you know that he's going to have opposition. Right? So I left, and so we started to put together this opposition for Kirkland. And this was, he knew it would be serious. So it's the first time that he basically ran a campaign. And he went from all parts of the country, around and around and around. He started out in, I think it was L.A.
Yeah. Los Angeles? Or
He started out in L.A. And at every one of these stops that he made, trying to get support and the central bodies together and all that kind of business, he would end up the meeting with any questions. And I was right there at the microphone, and I blasted the shit out of him, this foreign travel and all this. What the hell's the AFL-CIO doing with an office in Paris and all that shit? And really let him have it. Really, it upset him, something awful. And so then we'd go to the next stop. And I'd go right there at the next stop. And do it all over again to him, all over again. And we finally made our way to Chicago.
That was the last of these four.
Last of these meetings he was having. And he went to the microphone, and he said, "This meeting is going to be different from these other meetings that I've had throughout the country." And I know I'm very happy about that, and I know this fellow standing by this microphone will be very happy about that as well. And he said he read a letter that George Meany wrote when he was retiring. Remember that?
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. And that was it. He retired right there.
Yeah.
Right there, he retired. And so they had then held a short, fast convention, and Tommy Donahue went in. And I'll never forget this. It was one of the funniest things I think I ever said. I mean, it was all due
I know what this is.
what's that lady's name?
Barbara Easterling. I
Barbara
bet.
Easterling got elected, Tommy got elected president. I mean, of course, it was for like 2 months or 3 months, something like that. And she got elected secretary treasurer, Barbara Easterling. And oh, she was as happy as a clam, man, jumping around and everything. You know. And I walked over to her and I said, Barbara, just remember this, queen for a daddy. Oh, and she got so upset, so upset. Oh my God, please, so upset. And then that's when we decided that we'd run somebody against Tommy. And,
Tommy first had to try to call in his chits with you guys.
Yeah, whatever chits he had. Yeah, he tried to call him in, and he asked for our support, and we said no, we're not going to do that. And so that's when we put a team behind John Sweeney. And I remember he was up in Nova Scotia
Mhm.
at a meeting of SEIU. And I called a meeting here and invited all the press and everything. And I said,
Right here in this room.
yeah, I said I wanted to announce that John Sweeney will be the candidate, right, of our opposition to Wayne Kirkland. And of course, he had, well, I'm going to be for myself. He had retired. And so it was Tommy that would be running.
Mhm.
And we said that Sweeney would be a candidate for president. And they said, well, where is he? I said, well, he'll be here sooner or later. He'll be here, don't worry about it. And that's how we put that part together. And John didn't want to be
No, sir.
president of the AFSCME.
No more than you did.
Huh? Oh, yeah, well, that's true. I didn't want to either.
Well, why John Sweeney?
Huh?
May I ask, why Mr. Sweeney? Why did you choose?
Why'd you pick him? I mean, you start with Trump, right?
Yeah, well, Trump won it, but he was very young, very, very young. And I told him, I said, you'll have your day. I mean, there's no question about it. But today's not it. So it was John Sweeney. He came from a big union. He knew a lot about, and it was important too that the public sector be really recognized, right?
Mhm.
So that's where John, by then was really out of the public sector, and as a result, he became our candidate. Yeah, Barbara?
Tell him what else you did. What Linda, that was.
Oh, yeah, well, we had a meeting, and I don't know where I even got this idea from. I said, we were putting together a slate. I said, and I think we ought to have an executive vice president, and it should be Linda Chavez. Yeah. Everybody said, that's all right, it sounds okay to me. So we had that.
When we got to New York for the convention, so here's think of 1995. So you have the election in November of 1994. Gingrich comes in, inauguration's January '95. Not the inauguration, but the swearing in. They immediately put all the Congressional Accountability Act, Medicare, Medicaid, the tax reform budget, and all this stuff. That's January, February, March. The AFL Executive Council meeting in the spring meeting is like late February, early March. And that's where you have this cabal of other union presidents who decide that they're in with you, right? I mean, didn't Kirkland go around the room to check on who was with him and who wasn't?
Yeah, that was earlier.
Oh, that was earlier?
Yeah, that was earlier. Kirkland did go around the room with Tommy, really, to find out whether people were with them or whatever, right? And in terms of going around the room, he had people in the room. He had more people in the room than we did in the room. But they didn't count the votes of the people that we had versus the votes of the people that they had. So I knew we had their ass. And so we leave the room, and the three of us go to the bathroom. A lot of pee in this story. And so we go to the bathroom, right? And Kirkland's on one side, Tommy's on the other, and I'm in the middle, right? And I'm watching, and they can't pee, right? And I can. And I said, oh, we got these suckers, these suckers lined up, really. So
That, you didn't put that in the book. That got left out of the book. Okay. Well,
it is what it is.
It is what
We
it
cut a
is.
lot of things out of the
I
book.
imagine. So the AFL convention, so that June you're in Chicago, Kirkland steps down, they have the special meeting, Donahue gets in, Easterling's the secretary-treasurer for a day. The AFL convention then is in September, and Donahue spends the next 2 or 3 months trying to peel off some of your majority, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had the help of Georgine, because you had building trades in the majority, and Georgine was trying to bring them back to support Donahue, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had the help of
Teachers.
teachers, the food and commercial workers. He had big unions. I mean, he had ended up with over 40% of the vote, didn't he? It wasn't that totally lopsided. And you get to New York, and so far nobody's dropped out. Everybody's still together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but they control the convention. It's their convention. They're the home team, and they tried a number of things to see if they could flip the outcome. And one of them that scared us was that they were going to. We got a rumor that they were going to invade the hall with some very large people from the local 3 of the IBW, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had to make some kind of threat.
Well, 2 things. At the convention, we got great response from our central guys to come to the convention. Now, they only had 1 vote, but there were a lot of them. So they controlled voice votes and everything else. They all sat in the back. So that was a good move, smart move. And the other one was, as Paul mentioned, the rumor that the IBEW was going to crash the hall. And I told Tommy Donahue, I said, if that happens, we're going to have Council 37 crash the hall as well. And we'll make your people scared to death. Scare them to death. So they called that back. So that was it, wasn't it?
And, well, there were test votes, and we won the test votes, and then
Sure.
you negotiated a peace treaty so that they could have their seats back on the council.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Sweeney took over, and he didn't fully clean house. I mean, he kept some of the old people,
Sure he did.
but brought in some new people. That's when Change to Organize. That was part of his that was part of the whole campaign slogan, was that the AFL had fallen down on the aggressive role that it needed to assume, and the organizing unions like us at SEIU were saying this is crazy, and the labor movement's got to do what it has to do to change. But you then took that back into our organization
Mm-hmm.
in the period between fall of 95, and Sweeney's elected, and summer of 96 at our own convention was also when AFSCME's changed organized plan was developed, and led to the organizing model, led to the people in the field are familiar with that. We now have, well, we changed the name of the department, so it's now Organizing and Field Services. We created organizing job classification training program, apprentices, journey, the whole 9 yards all came out of that moment in time. And then it turned out that the politics with Gingrich in ascendancy were not necessarily there. It wasn't like the Republicans had taken over, because in 96, lo and behold, the Democrats got reelected, right?
Mm-hmm. And not only that, some of the things he did ended up helping us, because the architect of the Capitol.
Yes, that's true.
We ended up organizing those people, and we were recognized.
You got to thank Newt Gingrich for that, huh?
Yeah, got to thank Newt Gingrich for that.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So the custodians on Capitol Hill got collective bargaining rights through that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the tour guides.
And the tour guides, yeah. Well, that was later. So the presidents who worked with you in the Kirkland fight and then the Donahue fight, who were the principal ones that formed the cabal that you chaired the meetings, right? With a bottle of Miller in your hand.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But Teamsters.
Yeah, that's Ron Carey.
Machinist.
The little guy, the short guy, the machinist. What was his name? Okay.
Oops.
Right, George Corpus. Right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember him.
UAW was in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Steelworkers.
Mm-hmm.
Carpenters were in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Laborers were in the group.
Yeah.
And between those unions, there was about 50% of the membership right there, probably.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Back there. But isn't it true that even long before that, I believe I remember you speculating as to what it would take to get to knock Kirkland out? This was something that you'd been thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is this true? Let's admit it now. It's true.
Sure, it's true.
It didn't just occur as a result of Kirkland saying that he had a rainy day fund.
Well, that gave us the reason.
That gave us a good campaign slogan. But in '94, when Clinton was passing NAFTA, and you were fighting NAFTA, and we had a big anti-NAFTA rally that we led, because we were having a big conference there, or CSCA was having its conference or something. Anyway, we had a lot of green shirts on the lawn of the Capitol, and you called to ask Kirkland to come speak at that rally, and he couldn't do it because he was in Switzerland at some international meeting. And it struck all of us as funny priorities from what was going through.
Yeah, yeah. Funny priorities.
Any 1995 questions in the House? No 1995 questions. Well, we're going to dismiss the class 10 minutes early in that
All
case.
right.
Unless Joe Lawrence has a question. You want to unmute
Yeah, let me
the
do
phone?
that.
I bet Joe Lawrence has got a question, so he's not going to let us go early.
Let me go this way.
It's a long class.
Not mine, it's his.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
So, the lines are open for any questions for Mr. McEntee.
Well, yeah, this is Joe.
I knew it. Good for you.
This is can I get in a pre-95 question?
Yes, sir.
Going back to the Champa, he seemed to have I've always been kind of interested in this fellow, but I never knew much about him. When did Worth bring him on, and what was it like? Because he was like a number two during a very transformative period. Were there any other stories except for were there any other stories worth noting about Champa?
He must have come on by 66 or 66
Yeah,
or
something
67
like that.
would be when he came on, Joe. I mean, there's a whole volume that I'm sure you've read, that's the history of the Memphis strike, that Champa was sent down there to help with, and got in the face of the mayor, got slugged hit by police clubs at one of the marches, and knocked to the ground and really badly injured.
It's called is it going down Jericho? What's the
Down Jericho Road or whatever
Yeah.
that book. But it's I mean, you can see Champa in any of the documentary films on Memphis or any of that. So he was he had already been hired on as a senior field general of the Union. What we don't have at our fingertips is a whole list of the major organizing drives of the Union, because during these years, after Pennsylvania, the Union was organizing at a rapid clip in many parts of the country at the same time. And the field generals, like the ones that Jerry talked about, who were the main ones, had were on the ground in multiple of the field campaigns. And after Jerry was president and other field service directors, same thing was true of Tom King, same thing was true of Paul Goldberg, who came in as served a period of time as field services directors, and me too, I suppose.
I remember when Champ died, and he was laid out in Baltimore, in one of those open casket things. And we were having a board meeting, and we all went over to the viewing. And Worf was right in front of me. And he said to Champ, "Tough to lose you, old friend, but I'll be joining you shortly."
And he did, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah, it was very-
Champa predeceased him by a very short time.
And Jerry,
Yes, Joe.
and maybe you touched on this during your remarks. I mean, in hindsight, it would seem a mystery, but why considering the straits we were in, why did so many of those affiliates, AFL affiliates, hang on to the old way? What goes on in their minds?
Well, I certainly don't know what goes on in their minds, but they're more of a, I don't know, it's more of a clique And, well, you know as well as I do, Joe. I mean, you know, it's old ways, and they're stuck in these old ways, and you know, they've embraced these old ways. And Trumka now has changed some of that, not all of it, but some of that, and it's the way it is.
Okay.
These are, you know, we're trade union institutions that have been successful doing things one way, and then run into the barriers to continuing to succeed that we've run into. Big barriers, very vicious in some cases. But you don't automatically transition to a new way of doing things without a lot of relearning or changing of the guard. So when we did our change to organize in the late 90s, I think the phrase was, we either have to change the people or we have to change the people. By which we meant either we have to change the people by giving them new skills, or we have to get a whole bunch of new people. Actually, we did both. Did both of those things.
Well, I have to bid you folks adieu. I'm headed to Joe Ames's home state. I'm headed to the airport right now.
Yeah. Well, you guys.
Jerry, this was very good. This was splendid. I'm glad you took time for this.
Good. Thank you, Joe.
And thanks everybody, and we will call it a night. Thanks everybody.